The fluorescent lights inside Brooks Auto Repair flickered twice before settling into their usual steady hum. Daniel Brooks didn't look up from the engine he was working on, a 2006 Honda Civic with a timing belt that had seen better days. His hands moved with practiced precision, fingers finding bolts and connections in the dim space under the hood without needing to see them. A wrench hung loose in his right grip, and sweat, mixed with motor oil, streaked across his forehead. "We're closing in 10 minutes, he called out, assuming whoever had triggered the door chime was another last-minute customer hoping to squeeze in a quick oil change. But when he turned around, the person standing in the middle of his garage was not a customer. A woman with blonde hair stood beneath the buzzing lights in a cream-colored dress and high heels, one hand resting on her hip. She looked at him with dark eyes that held equal parts determination and desperation. She did not belong here, not even close, but she had not come to the wrong place. "I'm not here for car repair," she said. "I'm here for you, and I need you to say yes before I explain why." Daniel wiped his hands on the red shop rag that perpetually hung from his back pocket and stepped around the front of the Civic. Every instinct he had developed over 12 years as a mechanic and 8 years as a single father went on high alert. He had learned to read people over the years, learned to spot the customers who would try to skip out on their bills, learned to identify which problems people brought into his shop were about their cars and which were about their lives. This woman was bringing him something, and it was not engine trouble. She stood in the middle of his oil-stained garage in that cream dress, and heels like a painting hung in the wrong frame, but her dark eyes were older than the rest of her, and the way she gripped the strap of her leather bag told him she was fighting to keep her hands from shaking. "My name is Ivy," she said, taking a step forward. Her steps were quick and purposeful now that she had committed. Ivy Langford. The name meant nothing to Daniel. No recognition. No association. No alarm bells beyond the obvious ones already ringing. Her voice carried an odd mixture of nervousness and determination that made him listen despite himself. "I know this sounds absolutely insane," she continued, "but I need you to come with me to a family event this weekend. Pretend to be my boyfriend. I'll compensate you for your time, whatever rate seems fair." Daniel laughed. It came out short and surprised, the kind of laugh that escapes before you can stop it. Then he saw her face and realized she was completely serious. "I don't do loans," he said immediately, "and I'm not interested in any business opportunities or investment schemes. If that's what this is about, you should leave." "It's not about money," Ivy said. Her voice was steady. "Serious. It's about survival." He noticed she had moved deeper into the garage, setting her bag down on the workbench beside them. A deliberate gesture, one that said she was not planning to run. She told him she had been watching the shop for 3 weeks. She had run a standard public records background check. She knew he closed at 8:30 every Tuesday and Thursday evening, picked up a little girl from the elementary school 3 blocks from here, and drove her home to an apartment 3 miles away. She knew he worked honest hours and paid his bills on time. Daniel's hands clenched into fists without him realizing it. "You've been following my daughter?" "No." Ivy's eyes went wide, and she held up both hands in a gesture of surrender. "God, no. I would never. I ran a background check. That's all. Standard public records search. I wasn't stalking you. I was making sure you were who I thought you were. And who did you think I was? Someone trustworthy." Her voice softened. "Someone who wouldn't judge me or try to use what they learned about me. Someone who would just help if I asked." Daniel wanted to send her away, close the shop, go home to his daughter, forget this woman and her cream-colored dress and her desperate eyes had ever appeared in his garage. But there was something else there, too. Something in the careful control of her voice, in the way she held herself, in the fact that she had come here alone on a Saturday night to ask a stranger for help. He had seen that kind of desperation before, usually in people who had run out of other options. "Why me?" he asked quietly. Ivy told him her father had died 6 months ago after a long illness. He had left her certain responsibilities, she said, choosing her words with surgical care and offering no specifics. The event this weekend was an engagement party for her cousin Victoria, the first major family gathering since the funeral. Everyone would be watching her, assessing how she was handling things, making judgments about her stability and her capacity and her future. If Ivy showed up alone, her family would assume she was not coping. They would assume she was isolated and vulnerable and in need of intervention. They would use it as evidence that she was not capable of managing her own life, let alone the responsibilities her father had left behind. But if she showed up with someone stable and normal and completely unremarkable, it proved she was fine, that her life was moving forward, that they did not need to worry or interfere or make decisions on her behalf. Daniel asked why she did not hire an escort service or ask a friend or find literally any other solution than walking into a stranger's garage. Ivy's answer came out harsh and bitter. I can't trust my friends. And I can't hire someone through the usual channels because this situation requires absolute discretion. I need someone who exists completely outside my normal world. Someone who won't recognize the names involved or understand the stakes or care about any of it beyond doing what I'm paying them to do. What kind of family event needs that level of secrecy? Daniel asked. Ivy hesitated, and he could see her weighing how much to reveal. An engagement party. My cousin is getting married and the family expects me to bring a date. If I show up alone, there will be questions, assumptions, pressure. I just need someone to stand beside me for one weekend and help me avoid all of that. Daniel turned away from her, moving back toward the Civic. His hands found the hood and lowered it carefully into place. He had learned over the years that sometimes people needed a moment of silence to either come clean or leave. He waited to see which one Ivy would choose. My father was sick for a long time, and then he was gone. Her voice was so quiet that Daniel almost missed it over the ambient sounds of the garage. He turned back around. Ivy was looking down at her hands, her fingers twisted together, and suddenly, everything in my life became complicated in ways I wasn't prepared for. This party, it's the first major family gathering since the funeral. Everyone will be watching me, judging how I'm handling things, making assessments about my stability and my judgment. Daniel saw the shift in her expression then, and her eyes were fierce now, burning with something he recognized as pride, refusing to bend under weight that should have broken it. If I show up alone, the people who have been waiting for me to fail will get exactly what they've been waiting for, and I'll spend the next several years fighting battles I'm not sure I can win. But if I come with someone, maybe I buy myself enough time to figure out how to fight them properly. There it was, the expression Daniel recognized because he had seen it in his own mirror more times than he wanted to count. Pride and desperation in equal measure. The face of someone who had run out of options but refused to admit it. Ivy placed a white business card on the workbench, just a phone number printed in black ink. $20,000, she said. Half up front. Call me by tomorrow evening if you're interested. If I don't hear from you, I'll understand. Then she turned and walked out of his garage, disappearing into the darkness outside. She left behind the faint scent of expensive perfume and the white rectangle of cardstock sitting on his workbench. Daniel stood alone in his garage for a long time after that, staring at the card and thinking about all the reasons this was a terrible idea. Then he thought about his daughter's smile when he told her they might be able to afford the science camp she wanted. He thought about the leak in the garage roof. He thought about the weight of building a life on a mechanic's salary in a city that got more expensive every year. And he thought about the look in Ivy Langford's eyes, that mixture of pride and desperation that he recognized because he saw it in his own mirror more times than he wanted to count. He picked up the business card and slipped it into his wallet. Sunday morning arrived with the sound of his daughter's footsteps thundering down the hallway. Daniel had exactly 3 seconds of warning before Emma launched herself onto his bed with enough force to make the frame creak. "Dad, wake up. You promised we could make pancakes." She was 8 years old and constitutionally incapable of moving at any speed slower than a sprint. She had her mother's dark curls and her mother's wide smile, but everything else, the stubborn determination, the bright curiosity, the absolute certainty that the world was full of interesting problems waiting to be solved, that was all Emma. Their apartment was small, but theirs. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen barely large enough for one person to cook in, a living room that doubled as Emma's play space and Daniel's office. They had lived there for 6 years, ever since Daniel had saved enough for the security deposit and the first month's rent. It was not much, but it was theirs. Emma chattered continuously while Daniel mixed pancake batter, telling him about the book she was reading and the experiment her science teacher had shown them on Friday, and how her friend Madison had a new purple bike with sparkles. Daniel made appropriate sounds of interest while his mind circled back to a business card in his wallet. $20,000. The science camp Emma wanted to attend next summer. The leak in the garage roof he had been putting off for 3 months. The diagnostic equipment he had been eyeing for years. "Dad, you're not listening," Daniel blinked. Emma stood with her hands on her hips in her best impression of a disappointed parent. "Sorry, Em." "What did you say?" She repeated her request for the park after breakfast, and Daniel agreed. Over pancakes at their small kitchen table, he brought it up carefully. "I might take on some extra work this weekend. Pays really well." Emma considered this while methodically destroying her pancakes into smaller and smaller pieces. "Would I have to stay with Uncle Marco?" Marco was not actually her uncle, but he had been Daniel's best friend since high school and was a fixture in their lives. Emma adored him. Probably, or maybe he could come stay here. Then, in a voice so casual it broke his heart, "As long as you come back." She was 8. She should not have to worry about people coming back, but her mother had left when she was 3 months old, and even though Emma had no conscious memory of it, some part of her had internalized the lesson that people could disappear. "I will always come back," Daniel said quietly. "You know that, right? No matter what, I will always come back to you." "I know, Dad." Emma rolled her eyes in the way only an 8-year-old could. "You're getting all mushy. Can we go to the park now?" That afternoon, Daniel sat on a bench at the playground, watching Emma attack the monkey bars with single-minded determination. Her face was red with exertion, her small body strong and fierce and absolutely certain it could conquer anything. He pulled out his phone 3 times before finally dialing the number. Ivy answered on the second ring. "I have one condition," Daniel said, watching Emma swing from bar to bar. "My daughter stays completely out of this. If at any point this crosses a line I'm not comfortable with, I walk away. Money or no money." "She will," Ivy said immediately. "I promise you, Daniel. Your daughter won't be affected." He watched Emma hang upside down from the bars, her face scrunched in concentration and triumph. "Okay," he said. "I'm in." The rest of the week passed in a blur of preparation and second-guessing. $10,000 appeared in Daniel's account Monday morning, transferred from a corporate account he did not recognize. Ivy sent over a detailed schedule for the weekend and the address of a formal wear shop where she had already arranged for him to be fitted for a suit. Dark charcoal gray, crisp white shirt, burgundy tie that probably cost more than his usual wardrobe combined. She prepared their cover story with methodical precision. They had met 4 months ago when she brought her car into his garage. He was professional and competent. They started dating casually, nothing serious yet, but they were seeing where things went. "This is insane," Marco said Wednesday evening, leaning against the garage workbench while Daniel finished an oil change. "You know that, right? 20 grand to be some rich lady's arm candy for a weekend. It's like something out of a movie." Then his face went serious. "If you don't call me every 12 hours to check in, I'm calling the cops. Deal?" Thursday night, Daniel tried on the suit. He barely recognized the man in the bathroom mirror. Emma appeared in the doorway, eyes going wide. "Whoa, you look like a secret agent." She circled him, examining the suit from all angles, then straightened his tie with the solemnity of someone performing a critical task. "Will there be cake?" "Probably. Bring me some. Promise. I'll see what I can do." Friday evening came too quickly. 6 o'clock. Daniel stood in his apartment wearing the rented suit and feeling like an imposter. Marco had already arrived for Emma duty, loaded with snacks and a stack of movies. Emma was delighted. Daniel was terrified. The knock came at exactly 6. Ivy stood in the hallway wearing a simple black dress and heels, her hair down around her shoulders instead of the practical ponytail from the garage. She looked polished, expensive, and completely out of place in his building's worn hallway. But when her eyes swept over him, something like relief crossed her face. "You look perfect. I look uncomfortable." "That too." A small smile. Emma studied the visitor from the living room doorway with open curiosity. "Hi," she said, with the directness of children everywhere. "You're pretty." Ivy's smile softened into something warm and genuine. "Thank you. You must be very smart if you're Daniel's daughter." "I'm in advanced math," Emma said proudly. "And I'm going to be a scientist when I grow up. The world needs more scientists." Emma seemed satisfied with this response. She hugged Daniel tighter than usual. "Bye, Dad. Have fun at your fancy party." The sedan turned onto a private road marked only with a discreet sign that read Langford. What followed made Daniel's stomach clench. 200 acres of manicured grounds stretching into darkness. A main house of stone and glass that had to be at least 12,000 square feet, glowing with warm light. Luxury cars already parked in the circular drive. The guest house, where they would be staying, was about a quarter-mile from the main property. It was still larger than any place Daniel had ever lived. His room had a king bed, a private bathroom, a closet bigger than Emma's entire bedroom. He stood at the window, looking out at the darkened estate grounds, and wondered what he had gotten himself into. His hand touched the business card still in his wallet. Whatever happened this weekend, at least he had stepped outside the boundaries of his small, careful life. At least he had tried. Saturday morning. Brunch with approximately 30 family members in a formal dining room, crystal chandeliers overhead, a table that could seat 40. Daniel walked in beside Ivy and felt every eye in the room sweep across him like a scanner, cataloging his clothes, his posture, the only pair of dress shoes he owned, the hands that were clean now but still carried the permanent calluses of a man who worked with tools. Ivy transformed beside him. Shoulders squared, chin lifted, expression smoothed into something polite and perfectly controlled. She was putting on armor. Daniel realized she performed just as much as he did in this room, maybe more. A woman in her 60s appeared at the entrance first, silver hair perfectly styled, designer pantsuit, and an expression that was equal parts surprise and calculation. "Ivy, darling, how wonderful that you could make it." Her eyes slid immediately to Daniel, assessing him head to toe in a single sweep. "And you've brought a guest." "Aunt Caroline." "This is Daniel Brooks." "Daniel." "My Aunt Caroline Langford." Daniel extended his hand. Caroline took it briefly, her grip cool and minimal, lasting exactly the amount of time politeness required and not a second more. "Mr. Brooks, how interesting. I don't believe we've heard Ivy mention you before. We've been keeping things quiet," Ivy said smoothly, her hand finding Daniel's. Her fingers were cold despite the warm morning. A tall man in his 60s separated from a group near the windows. Distinguished gray hair, sharp eyes that reminded Daniel immediately of Ivy's. Thomas Langford, the family patriarch. His handshake was firm, his gaze evaluating. "Brooks. Not a name I'm familiar with. What business is your family in?" Here it was, the first real test. Daniel met his eyes steadily and did not blink. "My family isn't in business, sir. I'm a mechanic. I own a small auto repair shop on the south side." The silence that followed was brief but absolute. Daniel felt every person within earshot register this information, catalog it, form opinions. Ivy's hand squeezed his harder. Thomas repeated the words slowly. "A mechanic. How refreshingly honest." Caroline's voice cut from behind them, dripping with enough skepticism to fill the room. "Common interests between a mechanic and a Langford. How extraordinary." Ivy's response was immediate and sharp. "We're both people, Aunt Caroline. Surely that's common ground enough." Before Caroline could respond, a younger woman approached with a genuine smile that seemed out of place in this family. "Victoria, the cousin getting engaged, blonde hair and a friendly demeanor. You must be Daniel. It's so nice to finally meet someone who makes Ivy smile." Robert, Victoria's fiancé, pulled Daniel aside with quiet solidarity. "Feel free to hide in a corner with me if you need an escape route. I'm surviving this too." When Thomas asked about Emma, every instinct Daniel had screamed to protect his daughter, to keep her outside the awareness of these people and their complicated world. But he answered steadily, "Emma's 8. 3rd grade. She wants to be a scientist when she grows up. Her stability is my first priority, always. Any relationship I have needs to work for her, not just for me." For the first time, something that looked almost like respect crossed Thomas's expression. "Family should always come first," the older man said, and his tone carried genuine conviction rather than social performance. The rest of brunch blurred into a stream of careful navigation. Daniel answered questions honestly when he could, and vaguely when he had to, following Ivy's earlier coaching. He watched her shift between relatives, like someone changing languages, warm with Victoria, guarded with Caroline, respectful but distant with Thomas. She was breathing through a performance, and the effort of it was visible only to someone who knew where to look. After brunch, they escaped to the guest house like prisoners reaching sanctuary. Ivy kicked off her heels and collapsed onto the couch with an exhausted sigh that seemed to come from somewhere deep. "God, I hate these things." Daniel sat in the armchair across from her. "Then why do them? Because appearances matter, because if I don't show up and play the game, they'll use my absence as evidence against me. Because that's how my family works." Perception is reality. For the first time since they had met, the careful control dropped entirely. Ivy told him about her father. He had believed in self-sufficiency regardless of wealth. He made sure Ivy could cook, manage her finances, take care of herself. "Complicated, demanding, impossible sometimes," she said. "But good. He had very clear ideas about what it meant to be a Langford, and he made sure I understood the responsibility that came with the name. When he died, everything fell to her." Her closest relationship before this had ended when the man she was seeing told her he did not want to date her company. Daniel shared his own story in return. It felt only fair. Michelle, his ex-wife, had not been a bad person. She struggled with the weight of a life that was harder than she expected, and she left when Emma was 3 months old. Never came back. Daniel did not blame her, but he had built walls since then. High ones. "I know what it feels like to be alone in a room full of people," he said quietly. "After my wife left, I'd go to friends' birthday parties and feel like the only one who didn't belong, like everyone else had figured out some secret I'd missed." 2 people looked at each other across the guest house, living room, and recognized, for the first time, the same wound wearing different clothes. Both lonely. Both carrying everything alone. Both expert at hiding it behind competence and control. Then Ivy's phone rang. Her face changed instantly, the color draining so fast Daniel could track it. She took the call upstairs, but he could hear her voice through the floor, growing sharper, harder, more commanding. Nothing like the soft, tired tone from moments before. 20 minutes later, she came back down. Her face was white. Her hands were shaking. "What happened?" Daniel asked. "The board chairman just called. There's an emergency meeting. Someone is making a move to remove me." Daniel stared. "Board? Remove you?" The truth came out in pieces, each one reshaping everything he thought he knew. Ivy was not some wealthy woman dealing with family pressure over inherited property. She was the CEO of Langford Industries, a conglomerate worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Her father had left her 51% of the company shares. Controlling interest. Absolute authority on paper, but someone had been systematically altering performance reports for 6 months, turning strong results into evidence of decline, building a methodical case that she was incompetent. The timing of the meeting was surgical precision. If Ivy left the party to fight, she proved she was unstable and obsessed with work. If she stayed, she gave them the window to move forward without her. Daniel stood in the middle of the guesthouse living room, looking at Ivy Langford, CEO of a company worth hundreds of millions. The business card in his wallet felt heavier than it had before. Everything he thought he knew about the woman who had walked into his garage was wrong. Daniel processed it the way he processed everything, in layers, methodically, the way a mechanic works through a diagnostic. Ivy was a CEO. $20,000 was pocket change to her. The garage visit, the background check, the simple dress, everything had been part of a survival strategy more complex than anything he had imagined. He had every right to be angry about being kept in the dark. But looking at Ivy now, hands trembling, eyes red, frantically cycling through phone calls trying to find a solution, he saw something he recognized. A person trying to survive a situation that had grown larger than they expected. He had seen that face in his own mirror every day for the first year after Michelle left. Ivy laid out the full picture. Uncle Thomas held 10% of the company shares. Aunt Caroline held 7%. If they sided against her in a competence hearing, their testimony would be devastating. She could not leave the estate without losing the family battle and the corporate one simultaneously. The board meeting was scheduled for Monday morning at 9 in Manhattan. She needed evidence of the fraud from the company's internal archive system, accessible only from terminals inside the building. Her assistant, Sarah Chen, knew where to find the proof, but could not handle the investigation alone. Daniel's mind worked the way it always did, when a car rolled in with symptoms that did not match any obvious diagnosis. Isolate the problem, find the broken component, fix it. "You stay here," he said. "Go to the party tonight. Smile. Make small talk. Prove you're stable. I'll drive back to the city tonight. Meet Sarah at the office. Gather the evidence." Ivy shook her head. "You don't know anything about corporate investigations or financial analysis or any of the systems you'd need to navigate." "No. But I know how to follow instructions. I know how to be methodical and thorough. And your family thinks I'm just your boyfriend, the mechanic. Nobody would suspect me of conducting corporate espionage on a Saturday night." She stared at him. "Why?" "This is way beyond what you signed up for." "Because of $20,000, Daniel said honestly, "and because someone using manufactured evidence to destroy another person makes me angry. I've dealt with people judging me based on assumptions my entire life. I don't like it when they win." Ivy called Sarah on speaker. Sarah's voice was crisp and professional, asking sharp questions and making lists. She walked Daniel through what they needed. Original division reports compared to the versions submitted to the board. Modification logs accessible through a backdoor access code that Ivy's father had established before he died. Ivy arranged a private car to drive Daniel back to the city. Before he climbed in, Ivy took his hand. Her fingers were cold. "Thank you. You don't have to do this." Daniel held her gaze. "Get ready for the counterattack. I'm not gathering all this evidence just to watch you fumble the presentation." Ivy laughed, and it was the first genuine sound she had made since the phone call. They were both surprised by it. 10 o'clock Saturday night. Daniel stood in front of the Langford Industries building, a sleek glass tower in Manhattan's financial district, the kind of place he had only ever seen in movies. The lobby was all marble and chrome, empty except for a security guard at the desk and a young woman waiting near the elevators. Sarah Chen was in her late 20s, Asian American with sharp eyes and the efficient energy of someone who managed impossible schedules for a living. Her handshake was firm. She got Daniel through security without raising questions, adding him to the visitor log as a family member, helping with a personal matter. They rode the elevator to the 15th floor in focused silence. The office space was dark and eerily empty on a weekend night. Daniel sat at Ivy's desk. Monitors, leather chair, the city glittering through floor-to-ceiling windows. He felt completely out of his depth. Then he focused. Sarah pulled up 2 documents side by side and walked him through the comparison. The original quarterly report from the manufacturing division showed a 12% increase in efficiency. The version that had been submitted to the board showed a 3% decrease. Someone had altered the data before it reached the board members. The pattern repeated across every division. Small changes, carefully calculated, invisible when viewed in isolation, but together they painted a comprehensive picture of systemic failure under Ivy's leadership. A manufactured narrative of incompetence built one forged number at a time. Sarah activated the backdoor access code. The system revealed a log of every modification made to board documents in the past 6 months. Who changed what? When? From which terminal? The evidence pointed in one direction. Nearly every alteration traced back to a single source. Richard Morrison's executive terminal. The board chairman. He had not merely supported the effort to remove Ivy, he had orchestrated and executed the entire scheme himself. Why didn't he delete the logs? Daniel asked. Sarah's expression was grim, because he planned to erase them after he was installed as interim CEO. Once he had operational authority, he could rewrite the record. No one questions the new boss's version of events, the arrogance of a man who was absolutely certain he would win. They worked for 6 hours, eyes burning from screen glare, coffee growing cold. Daniel and Sarah organized the evidence into a narrative so clear that even board members with no technical expertise could follow it. They encrypted everything and uploaded it to a secure server Ivy could access remotely. The car brought Daniel back to the estate after midnight. The main house still blazed with light from the engagement party, music and laughter drifting across the grounds. Daniel went straight to the guest house and found Ivy sitting on the porch in her evening gown, a wrap around her shoulders against the cool night air. She had been waiting. She stood when she saw him, and the relief that crossed her face was raw and unguarded. "You're back." "Morrison," Daniel said. It was him. Every altered report, his personal terminal, his access code, his timestamps. Sarah has all of it. Ivy pulled out her phone and scrolled through the uploaded files. Her hands were trembling. "This is everything," she said, her voice barely steady. "This is enough to destroy him." They stood together on the porch in the darkness, 2 people from completely different worlds who had just fought a real battle side by side, and the silence that settled between them was different than any silence that had come before. Sunday morning, Ivy attended the final family brunch with a composure so flawless it could have been sculpted. She smiled through conversations and congratulated Victoria and deflected Caroline's pointed remarks about Daniel's convenient work emergency the previous night. Nobody suspected anything. Afterward, Thomas pulled Ivy into his private study. He told her that Morrison had called him personally, that Morrison had expressed concerns about her leadership and suggested Thomas should support a transition of authority, that Morrison believed the company needed someone with more experience. Ivy kept her voice level and her spine straight. "After today, Uncle Thomas, you will find every one of those concerns addressed. And I am my father's daughter. Intelligence and ruthlessness in equal measure when it's required." Thomas studied her for a long moment, and something shifted behind his careful gaze. "Your father would have said exactly that," he replied. But then, the ground shifted again. Morrison moved the board meeting forward. Not Monday morning. Tonight, 9 o'clock Sunday evening. He knew Ivy was at the estate, and he was betting she could not get back in time to mount a defense. It was the final move of a man who wanted to ensure his target never had a chance to fight back. Ivy made her decision in seconds. No video conference, no proxies, no waiting. She would drive back to the city and walk into that boardroom herself. Daniel rode beside her. There was no time to change clothes. Ivy was still in her evening gown, wrinkled from the party she had abandoned mid-toast. Her hair was still pinned from the celebration. Daniel wore his mechanic's coveralls, the comfortable clothes he had changed into after returning from the office building the night before. Motor oil was still visible beneath his fingernails. They drove fast and said almost nothing. At 9:47 on a Saturday night, the boardroom doors of Langford Industries exploded open. 12 board members froze mid-discussion, their faces draining of color as they recognized the young woman they had just voted to remove as CEO. Beside her stood a man in mechanic's coveralls with grease under his fingernails and calm in his eyes. "I believe," Ivy said, and her voice cut through the stunned silence like a blade. "You gentlemen started this meeting without me." She walked to the head of the mahogany table and presented the evidence. Modification logs showing every alteration to board documents over 6 months. Original performance reports placed beside the falsified versions that Morrison had submitted. Every single change traced to Morrison's personal terminal with timestamps and digital fingerprints that could not be fabricated or denied. Sarah supported the technical walkthrough via video call from her apartment, methodical and devastating in her precision. Morrison tried to deny everything. He claimed the logs were fabricated, that Ivy was so desperate to maintain control that she had manufactured evidence against an innocent man. But the data was airtight. Access codes, timestamps, terminal identification numbers, and modification histories all pointed in one direction and one direction only. The board voted unanimously to remove Richard Morrison as chairman and refer his actions to law enforcement for criminal fraud and breach of fiduciary duty. Morrison, the man who 6 months ago had been confident he could dismantle a 28-year-old CEO piece by piece, left the boardroom under the silent gaze of 12 people who had believed his every word until 15 minutes ago. Ivy stood at the head of the table, evening gown wrinkled from a party abandoned hours ago, hair falling loose on one side. Beside her, a mechanic in coveralls with oil still visible under his fingernails. And for the first time in 6 months, she knew with absolute certainty that she had won, not because of money or family name or inherited power, because of the truth, carefully documented and impossible to deny, and because a stranger had chosen to help her when nothing in their arrangement required him to. Monday morning, Daniel unlocked his apartment door to the sound of Emma sprinting down the hallway. She launched into his arms before he could set down his bag. "You promised to bring cake." "I'm sorry, kiddo. I left before I could grab any. You always do that." Normal life returned. But Daniel had changed, even if the change was invisible to everyone but him. The full $20,000 cleared his account that afternoon. He paid off the garage's outstanding debts and fixed the leak in the roof that had been dripping for 3 months. $15,000 went straight into Emma's college fund. The rest bought diagnostic equipment he had been coveting for years. Emma noticed the shifts in the weeks that followed, the way her father said yes more often to small things. Ice cream after school. A new book, she pointed out at the store. The science camp registration he finally submitted with her name on it. She did not ask where the money came from. Some stories were too complicated for an 8-year-old. 3 weeks passed. Daniel fell back into the familiar rhythm of his life, engine repairs and school pickups, and Sunday morning pancakes. He checked the news occasionally and found a brief article about Richard Morrison's resignation and pending legal troubles, but nothing about Ivy herself. She had vanished back into her world of corporate leadership and family expectations, and Daniel had returned to his world of oil changes and timing belts and making sure Emma did her homework. It should have felt like closure. It felt like something important had slipped through his fingers before he fully understood what he was holding. "You've been distracted," Marco observed one Thursday evening as they closed up the garage together. "Checking your phone like you're waiting for something." Daniel denied it. Marco did not buy it for a second. "You're so focused on being practical and responsible that you forget you're allowed to want things for yourself. Not everything has to be about Emma or the garage or making the safe choice. When you're a single parent, everything is about the safe choice, and sometimes the safe choice is being honest about what you actually want." That same Thursday evening, the garage had been closed for an hour. Daniel sat in the small office doing paperwork, a single lamp casting warm light across invoices and receipts, then a knock on the door. When he opened it, Ivy Langford stood outside in a business suit, hair pulled back, dark circles under her eyes but something bright and certain burning behind them. She had come straight from the Langford Industries building. No phone call first. No warning. CEO to mechanic's garage, just like the first time. Except now they both knew who the other really was. "I can't stop thinking about that weekend," she said. "I tried to tell myself it was just a transaction, just a business arrangement that happened to get complicated." Daniel leaned against the doorframe. "No," he said, "it wasn't." Ivy did not ask for anything enormous. She did not propose a plan or outline terms or present a strategy. "Just dinner," she said. "A real dinner. Two people who want to know each other without a script or a cover story or $20,000 on the table." Daniel's answer came with one condition, and it was the same condition he had started with. "Emma meets you first. She gets veto power." Ivy nodded without hesitation. "I wouldn't expect anything less." Saturday night, Daniel took Ivy to the diner he and Emma had claimed as their own years ago. Burgers and fries and chocolate milkshakes with extra whipped cream. Ivy laughed at the menu and admitted she had not had a milkshake in years. Her nutritionist would have been horrified. Daniel told her Emma considered this place sacred ground. The following weekend, Emma officially met Ivy at the same booth. The 8-year-old studied the woman across the table with the analytical precision she brought to science experiments and monkey bars. "Are you my dad's girlfriend?" Ivy looked at Daniel, then back at Emma. Emma tilted her head, considered this with the gravity only a child can bring to questions of the heart, and delivered her verdict. "You bring good ice cream and we're fine." Weeks later, on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, Brooks Auto Repair, fluorescent lights humming their steady song. Daniel lay beneath a sedan, his coveralls stained with the honest work of the day. Ivy sat in the old folding chair beside the tool cabinet, the same spot Emma claimed every evening after school. A laptop balanced on her knees, quarterly projections glowing on the screen, while she answered emails from board members who now trusted her completely. Emma sat cross-legged on the concrete floor nearby, colored pencils scattered around her, tongue poking out in concentration as she worked on something important. She finished her drawing and placed it carefully on the workbench. 3 figures standing in front of a house. Crooked letters spelled across the top in a child's careful handwriting. My family. Outside, through the open garage door, a black sedan was parked next to a beat-up pickup truck. 2 worlds that had not merged into one. They had simply found the places where they touched. In a garage on the south side of the city, in a diner booth over milkshakes, in the quiet space between a workbench and a folding chair where a little girl drew pictures of the people she loved. Small moments, ordinary moments, true ones. And that was enough.